Loneliness used to mean being alone. Now it can mean sitting next to someone who knows your habits, your face, your daily routine, and still feeling unseen. This is the kind of loneliness people don't talk about. The kind that exists inside relationships, inside conversations, inside shared spaces that feel strangely empty. You laugh together, text each other, sleep beside each other, yet something feels missing. And the most confusing part is not knowing why. Psychology shows that loneliness is no longer just about the absence of people, it's about the absence of emotional presence. You can be surrounded and still feel disconnected. You can be loved and still feel alone. And when this happens inside a relationship, the loneliness cuts deeper than solitude ever could. What makes this trend alarming is how common it has become. More people than ever are reporting emotional isolation while being socially connected. Relationships look intact on the outside, but internally something has shifted. Conversations feel mechanical, attention is divided, emotional depth is replaced with convenience and routine. This video isn't about blaming technology or partners or modern life in simple terms. It's about understanding the quiet psychological forces that are increasing loneliness, even when we're not alone. Forces that slowly disconnect people without obvious conflict or drama. If you've ever felt lonely in a room, you shouldn't feel lonely in... Stay with me. Because once you understand why this is happening, you'll start seeing loneliness not as a personal failure, but as a psychological pattern that can be recognized, interrupted, and changed. One of the main reasons loneliness is increasing in relationships is emotional fragmentation. Attention is no longer fully present. Conversations are interrupted, responses are delayed, and moments that once created connection are now shared with distractions. The brain notices this immediately. Psychologically, emotional connection requires sustained attention. When attention is divided, the mind interprets it as disinterest, even if no harm is intended. Over time, this creates a subtle sense of rejection. Not dramatic enough to confront, but consistent enough to feel. People begin adjusting. They share less. They expect less. They stop reaching for depth because depth no longer feels rewarded. And this adaptation becomes mutual, slowly turning relationships into functional partnerships rather than emotional bonds. What's dangerous about this shift is that it feels normal. Everyone is busy, everyone is tired, everyone is distracted. But the brain doesn't care about explanations, it responds to experience. And when emotional presence is inconsistent, loneliness grows quietly, even in close relationships. Another reason loneliness grows inside relationships is the loss of emotional safety. Over time, people stop expressing their full inner world, not because they don't want to, but because it no longer feels safe or worthwhile. Small dismissals, misunderstood reactions, or emotional shutdowns teach the mind to stay guarded. Psychologically, loneliness isn't caused by silence alone. It's caused by feeling unable to be fully seen. When someone senses that their thoughts, fears, or emotions will be minimized or misunderstood, the brain chooses protection over connection. And protection looks like emotional distance. This is how two people can live closely while feeling miles apart. Conversations remain practical. Vulnerability disappears. The relationship functions, but it no longer feels alive. And because nothing is openly wrong, the loneliness feels confusing and isolating. Over time, this lack of emotional safety creates internal separation. You stop bringing your inner experiences into the relationship. You carry them alone. And that private emotional isolation experienced next to someone else is one of the most painful forms of loneliness the human mind can experience. Loneliness in relationships also increases when connection is replaced by routine. Habits take over where curiosity once lived. You know each other's schedules, preferences, and patterns, but you stop exploring each other's inner worlds. Psychologically, the brain associates connection with discovery. When there is nothing new to learn, no curiosity to engage, emotional stimulation declines. Familiarity becomes emotional flatness. And emotional flatness feels like loneliness, even when the relationship is stable. This is not about novelty in a dramatic sense. It's about presence and interest. When questions disappear, when listening becomes passive, when responses feel automatic, the mind registers a loss of engagement. And without engagement, emotional bonding weakens. Routine gives relationships structure, but without conscious effort, it also strips away emotional intimacy. And when intimacy fades, loneliness fills the space it leaves behind. Another hidden factor behind increasing loneliness in relationships is emotional self-sufficiency taken too far. Modern psychology encourages independence, strength, and self-regulation. And while these are healthy traits, they can quietly reduce shared emotional dependence. People stop leaning on each other. They process stress alone. They celebrate wins privately. They say, "I'm fine," even when they're not, because needing someone feels like a weakness. Over time, emotional sharing decreases, not out of distance, but out of habit. The brain, however, bonds through shared emotional experience. When emotions are handled individually instead of together, the relationship loses its role as a source of comfort and meaning. You're no longer emotionally alone, but you're emotionally isolated. This creates a paradox. Two emotionally capable people in a relationship can feel deeply lonely because they've stopped needing each other out loud. The relationship becomes stable, efficient, and supportive on paper, yet emotionally hollow. Loneliness grows not because love is gone, but because emotional interdependence has been replaced by quiet emotional separation. Loneliness is increasing not because people are alone, but because emotional presence is disappearing. Distraction, routine, emotional guarding, and excessive independence have slowly reshaped how we connect. Relationships still exist, but the psychological ingredients that make them feel alive are quietly fading. The most painful part is that this loneliness often goes unnoticed. There's no obvious conflict, no dramatic breaking point, just a gradual sense of emotional distance that's hard to explain and even harder to name. But awareness changes everything. Once you understand that loneliness grows from absence of presence, not absence of people, you can begin to reverse it. Connection doesn't require grand gestures. It requires attention, curiosity, and emotional availability. Here's your quiet assignment. For the next week, choose one moment each day to be fully present with someone you care about. No distractions, no multitasking. Ask one real question. Share one honest emotion. Notice what shifts, not just in them, but in you. And if this idea stays with you longer than expected, let it travel. Sit with it, revisit it. Share it in ways that feel natural. Sometimes the most meaningful communities form around conversations that aren't loud, but deeply felt.